All right, architecture. Roman architecture. So as we've seen, the statuary wasn't really more advanced than what the Greeks did. The Romans, as we saw, took a lot of ideas from the places that they conquered, whether it be the Etruscans, whether it be the Greeks. And with architecture, it starts out to be somewhat similar. Early architecture is going to be very, very similar, almost exactly the same as what the Greeks did. Whereas the Greeks had a lot of architecture that was ceremonial, and yes, they had their stoa, they had their amphitheater, things that were useful as well. The Romans really developed on this and made it, and developed this whole system of civic engineering, and we're going to see that a little bit more next class. But they planned their cities, they built bridges, aqueducts, public baths, marketplaces, apartment houses. We're going to see that more of that kind of basic kind of lifestyle architecture next time, because it's worth looking at. But their grand monuments were something altogether different from what the Greeks did. It was still based on the Greek system. It was still, yeah.
You know what we studied, is that the Parthenon or the
Pantheon. Parthenon is Greece.
Pantheon? Okay, so the Pantheon, we studied that last year. What?
Neoclassical,
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you.
when we're talking about neoclassical, yep. So this is an older temple from early Roman period. I don't remember what it's called, sorry. But it's very, very, very similar to what the Greeks were doing. Very similar. In fact, almost identical. This is obviously a smaller temple. This is actually in the Roman Forum that we're going to look at the end of class. But it looks very similar. You have the porch, you have the columns along the side. They didn't do a lot of what they didn't bring over from the Greeks is they didn't bring over those proportions. They brought the basic ideas and the basic concepts, but they didn't do the golden ratio. They didn't do the curved lines. They didn't get as exact there. Again, the Romans are less concerned with, how do I put this? The Greeks were more concerned with beauty and let's find the perfect and let's make things perfect and find the perfect man, the perfect proportions for architecture, all that kind of stuff. The Romans were like, great stuff, beautiful. Let's take these ideas and let's make it useful. And yeah, let's engineer the heck out of it and let's make it even better. But if we have to sacrifice proportions for usefulness, yeah, we'll do that. Okay? So that's been kind of the Roman angle. But you can see how the characteristics come forward, right? Let's first look at a little bit of architecture for infrastructure. First thing we'll look at is, and this isn't really art. We wouldn't even consider this architecture. We definitely wouldn't consider this art. We would consider this more infrastructure than anything else.
What?
These are aqueducts.
How? How those things go in the ocean?
Hmm?
Wait, those things belong in the sea or the ocean. Well, they use the aqueducts to get the water out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where is that?
The water goes from one place to another. So this is a way to get water from a freshwater source to a city miles and miles away. So kind of like how in Arizona we have the canals, they have the aqueducts. Okay?
Why not just do something like the canals? Why build them so tall?
Mountains. Canals can't go over mountains. Canals can't go over valleys. Otherwise, what do you have? You have a lake, right? So Arizona's pretty flat, and so they can or Phoenix is pretty flat, so you can just do canals and they're not raised up or anything, right? And again, we have pumps, right? We have hydraulic pumps. We have stations that can do that stuff. The Romans didn't have pumps. Everything had to be done through gravity. So they built these massive systems of canals, and the water is flowing here. Not anymore.
So is it like a
It's not.
slight decline?
Uh-huh.
That's absolute insanity.
Wait, how
Yep.
did they get it? How did they get the water up there?
It came from a lake up there,
The sky.
and it's going across a valley right now. So this is a valley. So you'll see in a second. This is what the top looks like. It wasn't protected. There wasn't a cover over it because they would have some filters, some rudimentary filters once it gets to the location. But this is their way of getting water from one place to another.
It's actually so pretty.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
Which way is it going?
I don't know.
No, okay, cool.
Down.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Wait, so sorry, how wide is that?
4 feet, 5 feet maybe. Not a lot, but it's going pretty quick.
How do
So,
you- Sorry.
go ahead.
How do you get it to go quickly? Is it like tilted?
Mm-hmm. Very slightly, and also you've got, you've got some little steps in some places where it's going to kind of waterfall down, and then that's going to just bring more water that way, right? So, the architecture the masonry was excellent. The Romans developed this system of cutting stones. It was mostly limestone in most of these places. This is the Pont de Garde aqueduct. This is in modern day France. And so you can see how the arches, how the systems of building, again, no one had ever seen anything like this before. The Romans were extraordinary at this infrastructure, building roads, building aqueducts, getting water from one place to another. You had to do that in order to move troops around. You had to do that in order to settle these places. And so they put massive amounts of effort and time into infrastructure. Infrastructure is not fun. It's not like building a pyramid, right? It's not grandiose in that sense. Even today, infrastructure, right? It is not, politicians don't win elections because they did a really good job with infrastructure. They have to do it, but that's why bridges nowadays are crumbling, because it's not impressive for for the Arizona senator to come back and go, hey, I cleaned up the water treatment plant. No, they're going to want to come back and talk about things that they did for veterans and veterans hospitals and things like that, right? But the Romans knew this. They knew that the backbone of a civilization is based on infrastructure, and so they put all of their money and their resources towards it, or a lot of their money and resources towards it. It was also cut into certain underground portions as well, so the water would be flowing through this. So you ask, how does an aqueduct work? This is a modern aqueduct. So this is like what we have in Phoenix, right? And then this is a Roman aqueduct.
They could build an intake?
Yeah, it's just a pipe. Basically, it's just a pipe with a filter, right? So you have it in your freshwater area. So you have a city over here. You have Rome over here that doesn't have a lot of fresh water, but you have some lakes that are 20 miles away. There's a mountain. All right, so let's cut a pipe and let's build this. This is an aqueduct. So basically, this is a way to get water from one place to another, where otherwise it would.
Okay,
How would you build
Cool.
that without the water rushing through while you're tunneling?
You build this first, and you stop this up. So you don't cut this section first. You cut all of this, and you do all of this, and then,
how did you cut through the mountain?
well, they did have slaves. They did have slaves.
Chisel would take 7,000
Yes.
So this was the Greeks had no influence over this.
No, this was entirely Roman.
They just drilled it.
Yep.
So the Romans were more advanced than the Greeks?
In this type of stuff, yeah. In terms of artistry, in terms of statuary, no. The Greeks were it. The Romans copied Greek statuary. And they did some things like we saw on Tuesday where they were more realistic, right? That kind of stuff. They made some changes, but no one's really going to do better than the Greeks in terms of statuary. Okay? But the Romans are going to advance quite a bit in terms of infrastructure, in terms of city planning that we'll see next time, in terms of architecture. And again, how do we do it today? Well, lots of pumps, right? And siphons. You know how a siphon works, right? So, or not a siphon. So if you have water in one area and you have a pipe here, it doesn't matter if the pipe goes up here. If it ends lower than where it starts, the water will come out.
What?
It's crazy. It's like people siphon gas.
Yeah, I don't understand how that works. How does that work?
Physics.
Yeah, the force of
So
the
here's a real life example. So we
It's in your sinks and everything.
we had a pool guy come and drain our pool because it had just tons of algae and stuff, right? So here's a cross section of the spa hot tub, right? And then here's the pool,
Yeah.
right? The pool is ground level. This is ground level, and our ground goes like that, right? So he drained the pool.
like a hill.
He put a pump in and he drained the pool and all the water came out of the pool. But he still had to drain the spa, which is above ground, right? It's sitting above ground a little bit. But part of it, the spa actually goes down here, and the water level's right here. Okay? So he pumped all the water out. Great. Turn the pump off. The pump is sitting down here. But there's still a hole in the pump, right? And there's a tube that was draining the water out here. Okay? So he turns the pump off. It's all empty. But he doesn't take the pump out of the pool. He turns the water back on and starts to fill the spa with a hose. So he's filling water in. But he leaves the pump. Even though it's going up for about 8 hours, we had water just going in here. Basically, everything that was going in the spa from the hose was going right back out. And I called him. I'm like,
That guy's a genius.
what are you doing? He's like, well, I turned the pump off. I said, it's a siphon. You just made a siphon. He goes, I don't know, man. I didn't go to college. I'm like, dude, it's physics. It's okay. That's,
How do you put
The
it?
force of the water fills the pump.
yeah,
He's like, I went to St. Mary's.
How was
It
your
did-
water bill?
Very.
huge water
Nice
bill.
water bill?
Yeah, upwards of $500. It was
So
great.
you get to pay for all that water?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, so that's basically how that's how this works. Even though if this is lower than this, you don't even need a pump, right? Generally speaking, that you will still, but and so the Romans knew this as well. But it's going to be a lot easier just to build an aqueduct, right? Instead of tunneling underneath.
They took materials from the Colosseum. stuck it in.
What's a treatment plant?
That's
What's that?
Treat the water, like make sure it's purified.
Like filter it out, add some chlorine to it to get rid of bacteria, that kind of stuff. Sometimes UV.
So people actually work in there? It's just
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yep.
They go in there.
Wastewater, everything you flush goes back through the treatment plant.
So they wouldn't have, their water wouldn't have been clean, it would have just come through?
It would have just come straight through.
Okay.
I mean, you would filter it out through basically when you use it. It's fresh, at least.
Yeah.
fresh.
At least.
Yeah. But also, it's running through these open aqueducts, and sunlight does disinfect water, right? As long as it's moving, sunlight will disinfect water. Broadly.
They probably didn't know that.
Broadly.
They probably didn't.
All right, the Pantheon. Pantheon is one of the most extraordinary pieces of architecture probably ever, and the Romans figured it out. The Romans figured out how to do it. From the front, it looks very much, and this is why I show you this picture first. From the front, it looks very much like a Greek temple, right? You still have and they did have sculptures up here that were taken down, pagan sculptures, that were taken down later by the church. But we have this porch, and you can see how big it is, right? There's a car right there. So a person standing is probably about this big, okay? I love the Pantheon. I could talk for a long time about it. I'm not going to. But this is an ancient building. Do I have the dates on it? Yeah, 27 BC it was started, and then it was redone in 127 AD a little bit later on. Huh? So there's a slope to the ground right here, but no, the foundation is flat. Mm-hmm.
When you say it's like redone in 127 AD, what is redone? Because like, do they totally destroy?
No. It would be added on to. So portions of it were added on.
Okay.
Is that marble or is it just like
Mm-hmm. This is all marble. I don't know if I have an inside view of the roof, but inside here is wooden. So if you're in here and looking straight up, you'll see wooden slats. These were niches where large statues would be. And then these doors, these are bronze doors. They're about a ton each. And they're old. These are the original doors. I've opened it. You can open it with one hand. It's so perfectly balanced. The hinges are so perfectly balanced that it's a door that's 1 ton. And you can just, I didn't open and close it. People were walking by, but I was able to, just, like, you can go up to it and just go.
Wait, you've been inside it?
Yeah. Yep. So it's beautiful.
Wait, where is that in?
Rome. Sorry, yeah, this is in Rome.
How is that like hinge? What is that hinge to? What are the hinges attached to?
Marble.
Home Depot quality.
Yeah,
Or did we redo the hinges, or are the hinges the same?
same. I mean, you put some grease in it and stuff, but
Yeah, but what kind of like? Is it like this regular door hinge kind of thing?
yeah, just very large. They balanced it perfectly. I used to know this.
Is that actually up there?
Made by Agrippa.
That those letters?
Yeah.
Yeah. Agrippa, LF,
Fake cheap.
tertium. Okay, so fecit means made this. The third, Maximus Agrippa, LF. I'm not sure. I should know that, but I don't. But basically made this in the 3rd year of his reign. Basically, whoever made this in the 3rd year of his reign. And you're going to see this, I think we've talked about this maybe in this class already, certainly last year. You're going to see this in Roman buildings all the time, right? This is showing who did it. Even today, the popes will do this in their building projects.
Sorry, Mr. Latham.
Uh-huh.
If one king ruler started it and then he died, and then the next ruler took over, who would get the credit for it?
Whoever finished it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Even if it wasn't his idea, he still gets the credit.
Yep.
How is it still intact? Because so many temples like this are like chipped away, their columns chipped away, but how is this one so intact?
Because it was used by the church later on. We'll get to that. But it wasn't left in ruin. It was kept intact. All right, so from the front, it looks like your standard kind of temple. You would think it's going to be square all the way back, but it is not. What they've done is they've created this drum.
Whoa.
So a drum is,
Why is it?
I use the term drum for basically a cylinder, right? So you have this often in domes of churches, right? So if you have this large basilica or church, you have these arches and archways. This is your nave, and these are your side, like buttresses. And then this part is called the drum. And the drum is usually what the dome sits on, okay? So they've built this building with this drum around it. Now, we don't know why they built it like this. Like, what was the reason why they decided to build it like this compared to a square one? We don't know. We don't have any records. But Pantheon, what does Pantheon mean, Tony?
Round.
All the gods. So this was a temple to all the gods, right? So they would have different statues in different places throughout the building.
Why is the front so pretty and the back looks like? I know it's like a thumb or 20 years. Yeah, it is that. But like, I don't understand.
Because from
the
eye
structure of it.
level, you're gonna be going in. You don't need to see the back. Let's not worry about it. Again, the Romans are very practical, right? What the Greeks added to in beauty, the Romans were like, let's just be practical about it. But the interior is extraordinary, right? So this is the front that we were looking at, right? This is the front, and then this part is the drum that we're looking at.
Is that all wood up top?
Nope, it's all cement.
Oh my word.
This is all cement.
They didn't have like
How's the roof like not like?
Yeah,
They
not
poured
caved
it.
in.
How? Well, because the most stable structure in physics,
Isn't
a
this something
physics
else?
person might disagree with me, but the most stable structure in physics is a sphere. It's hard to crush a sphere. Have you ever tried to hold an egg and just crush it with your hands, right? It's a lot harder than just breaking one little part of it, right? But the whole weight of a structure, if it's perfectly spherical, it's going to be difficult to crush. This is why domes work, right? Because even if you have a dome, which is basically a half sphere, the weight right up here, yeah, it's going to be pushing down, but you also have the weight coming down here, and then it's going to be sitting here on this drum.
And they haven't done like anything to it. Like they haven't like re-added stuff.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
What are the chances of it caving in?
Pretty nil. It was done so well. So there's a couple secrets as to why the Pantheon works.
Wait, is this one of the Rome's like prime
Mm-hmm.
possessions?
Yep. Almost 2,000 years after it was built, the Pantheon's dome is still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. Unreinforced meaning there's no rebar in it, right? This is just plain cement or concrete, right? There's no reinforcements in it. It's just mortar. It's just cement. Now,
There's got to be more into the cement then, because of the pole.
it's the way they built it. It's the way they built it. So the first thing is the first thing they did was they were very careful about the weight, and we'll get into the weight here in a second. The second thing they did was they built it in this spherical shape so that it was going to work. The Roman cement is a great lesson for us in knowledge about things that you don't. How do I describe this? There's a term for it: assumed knowledge. Right? So the Romans had this recipe, quote unquote, for cement. And for years, scholars, builders, from medieval times all the way through about 5 to 10 years ago, they were trying to figure out, how is Roman cement so dang strong? How is it so strong? Romans wrote down the recipe for cement. We have the recipe, so to speak. It's basically Roman concrete, a portable, moldable mortar of lime or gypsum, volcanic ash or rubble, and water. So we have the recipe. We even have the proportions. We have records of the proportions of how they built this. But every time we tried to build with it, with this exact recipe, it wasn't as strong. It held, but it wasn't as strong as what the Romans had.
Sorry, if you worked on posters yesterday in the art room, after this class, do not stop. Do not go anywhere else. Go down to the art room. Mrs. Rube would like to speak to you.
Okay, so we have this recipe for the cement, but we couldn't figure out, no one could figure out why it was so strong. Until one day, one researcher, again, this was pretty recently, this was about 5 or 10 years ago, one researcher went, wait a minute, water. Wonder if they use seawater. They did. Romans didn't even bother to put seawater in their recipe, in their records. They just assumed, well, of course, I mean, why would you waste fresh water on a building project? You would go get it from the sea. And modern builders were like, oh. So they started building using seawater, and yep, it's just as strong. So kind of a good lesson of assume knowledge.
Why does seawater make such a big difference?
Salt chemical reaction with all the other stuff is going to make it stronger. So they figured it out, right? And it's not like they went, oh, let's try seawater. That's just what they used. Because again, they're not going to waste their fresh water that takes a long time from their aqueducts. That's why we talked about aqueducts first. They're not going to waste that on a building project. Gallons and gallons and gallons of it. Okay, so the first reason why the Pantheon works so well and stands up, again, this is all unreinforced.
It looks way bigger from the inside.
That's what it looks like inside now.
This is inside, yep.
Holy shoot.
The second thing,
Wait, did they repaint stuff? Because that's like still really bright.
no, it's all marble. It's all original marble.
Oh my goodness.
The second reason why the dome stands, Tony, do you know this answer?
Because of the niches?
Yep. This is called a coffered ceiling. A coffered ceiling is a ceiling that has insets cut out of it. What does that coffered ceiling do?
Sound.
Weight.
Sound.
No, not sound. What does it do, Tony?
Down the weight.
It reduces the weight. You still have all the structure, right? You still have all the structure. These are basically like arches. And then you cut out the middle, you're reducing about half the weight of the dome just by that one simple action.
Yeah, it still looks good.
And it looks great. And it still stands. The other thing they did is they kept the inside open. This is called the oculus, or the eye. And it's still open to this day. There's no covering on it.
Oh, so what happens when it rains?
You get a little damp. There's a big drain right in the middle.
Oh, really?
There's a big drain, and it goes down to the Roman sewers.
Wait, it's in the other
Are
picture.
you
Oh,
serious?
serious?
Picture the drain.
That's delicious.
It's somewhere.
So it's literally
It's in there somewhere.
splash pad.
So this is all inlaid marble.
Floaties.
How did the water not ruin like the painting and all that?
There's no painting. There's no painting.
How do you make
There
that-
are some paintings. Well, actually, no, these are mosaics. So these are mosaics. This is all marble. There's no
How do you
painting
make
in
the
it.
exact pattern every time with marble.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
You're very, very good.
I've never seen a pattern on
That
marble.
doesn't make any sense.
Watch it, can you have?
What, this? Like this?
Yeah, how's that
Yeah.
marble?
These are all little pieces
Okay, but there's
inlaid.
like 8
So
different
you're talking about like
of the same.
mosaics?
They look.
Mhm.
There's 8 different other ones of those, and they look the exact same.
Yes, they're very, very good.
Doesn't make any sense.
So square coffers lighten the weight of the dome and symbolize the orbits of the celestial spheres as well. So why was this not destroyed? Well, because basically from the 7th century on, the church basically took this over. And this is now called Santa Maria ad Martires, or Our Lady of the Martyrs. And so the Christians said, all right, we're going to take this temple and we are going to repurpose it as a church to Our Lady of the Martyrs, especially the martyrs who suffered under the Roman persecutions. So it is now a church. This is the altar here.
So they say that.
And so you can see, so you can see the decoration that is there.
Did they
You could
add
see, so they did add this section, and instead of pagan statues in all of these niches, now we have statues of saints, and we have some tombs as well,
Dedicated to the martyrs.
to Our Lady of the Martyrs. Mm-hmm.
Are all the statues of martyrs then?
No, just various saints.
That the Romans killed, or like?
Some, but some other, I think like there's a statue of St. John the Baptist in there, I believe.
So it's nothing, any,
What in the
Monticello?
there's nothing else to do with the gods anymore.
No. So Monticello, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was a great architect, visited Rome, loved what he saw at the Pantheon, and said, I want to build something like that.
Yeah, that is so
It's
cool.
like for Zorro.
Yeah, I don't know why it's there.
Whoa.
Is that
There's a beautiful tradition that happens every year at the Pantheon. When there's Mass being said, Romans go up to the oculus, and they have, well, I'll just let you see. Rose petals, symbolizing the Holy Ghost coming down. And so the choir is singing, and these petals are floating through the air. It's one of the most striking. It's right during the exit procession of Mass. You see all the deacons there with their phones. But this is during the... Oh, people are doing it all the time. So they're just dumping buckets and buckets and buckets of rose petals. So it's a cool tradition that happens every year at the Pantheon, Pentecost, to symbolize the Holy Ghost. So that's the very end, right after the bishop has given his blessing. He's there at the altar, and then the recessional happens. No, this would not be a parish. This isn't a parish, I don't think. There are tons of churches in Rome. The big basilicas, it can be someone's parish, but most of the time you're going to go to a smaller church just down the road.
It's getting really hot though with the hole there.
Yeah, it's warm, but the cement also keeps it insulated. It keeps it pretty cool. All right, the Colosseum, also known as the Flavian Amphitheater. This is another example of an extraordinary building project. This has not lasted as well as some of the other ones. Again, Rome decayed. Rome went into ruin, right? Around 300, 350 BC is the fall of the Roman Empire. And then you have the Vandals, and you have all these people coming in, and basically from 350 until about 800 or 850, Rome is in ruins. Most of Rome is in ruins. It's not a nice place to live, right? It's dirty. It's all the things are being overgrown. People are taking portions of buildings and using it for their own. Yeah.
So would the Pantheon have been left alone because it was a temple and it was like a really important temple?
I think it was so magnificent that they left it. I think they probably defiled some of the statues, but then the church took it over in the 600s, and then the church protected it. But the church would not protect the Colosseum. In fact, quite the opposite. The church basically used a lot of the materials from the Colosseum to help with other building projects. They're like, well, this is sitting there, this is decayed. Let's use some of it, right? We got some pillars over here, we've got some supports, we've got a lot of iron. So all of these holes, all of these pockmarks that you see here, these are supports of iron that were taken out, and it was used for other projects. Now, they've been reinforcing it over time because parts of it have been crumbling, and the backside of it is almost totally decayed. So it's safe to go into now. But for a few hundred years, it was in ruins. And we would look at that and we would say, why would you destroy the Colosseum? Well, people in the 700s didn't care. They would look at it as like we see an old decaying strip mall. It's like, oh yeah, that old thing? Whatever, let's take some pieces from it. That's how they viewed it. But the Colosseum was a marvel of engineering. A couple architectural things to look at is, first we have these columns. It's interesting, the Romans used 3 orders of columns, first Doric, then Ionic, then Corinthian. And the Romans would start to do that. They would start to mix and match some of the Greek columns. And the Greeks would probably go, what are you doing? You can't do that. Yeah, well, whatever. It looks pretty. We'll do it. But it is a huge amphitheater, and it was done, this is the side of it. You can see how part of it is just...
all the way around and there's like that part
Uh-huh.
pulled off.
Mm-hmm. So you can see how there's 2 levels, right? There's an interior level that doesn't go as high, and then there's an exterior level that goes a little bit higher. So the stands, the bleachers basically, are going to go up, right? Not all the way up to here. This is just the section that holds up the roof, or it wasn't a roof, it was basically canvas that covered part of the Colosseum. But you have the stands that go all the way down, and then in here, just like a modern stadium today, you have walkways. So you can go up to your seats in this level, and then you go down the stairs, and you can go to your seats this way. So it's built just like your standard stadium today. This is the back of it today. So again, it's all been reinforced. It's all safe to go into.
There's
But
still like tunnels under it? Like,
There are.
is there stuff?
There are. So this is an exterior. This is a picture of the exterior, or sorry, the interior, and you can see the tunnels. Hold on, let me grab one thing really quick.
Are those like metal supports?
Yeah. Yeah, it is now. But back then it would have been either stone or it would have been wooden supports. So you have this. So this is the stage. This is the modern day stage, and you can kind of see it's all kind of deteriorated. But this, you can see where the stands were, and so they would have continued up that way and more. So you can kind of get an idea. And then these are the areas where the spectators can go and climb up to different sections. And so you can walk around. And they've recreated a portion of the stage or the floor. Back then it would have totally covered the entire thing. But here's where there were tunnels, right? So this is where they would keep, there would be little places to keep the animals, or the gladiators would hang out down there. There was actually basically a very rudimentary gym in one corner of it. Again, just like a stadium today, right? You have your locker rooms and you have a little gym and you have some places for storing equipment. Same thing with the Colosseum. So again, this is what it looks like today. Were there martyrs in the Colosseum? Not as many as we think. There were some, but not as many as we think. Even so, Catholics still see it as a place of pilgrimage because there were some martyrs who were killed here. And in the Jubilee year in 2000, Pope John Paul II put up a large cross to commemorate the martyrs. This is just the base of the cross, just to show the plaque that's there. He put up this cross to show this is a holy place, right? Obviously, it's still a.
They allowed him to put a cross up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does it say Sedente Giovanni Paolo?
So, on the Jubilee year of 2000, here sat John Paul II in the. Don't know. It's Italian. I don't know Italian. Here's a cross section of what the Colosseum looked like. It could fill. I'm not even looking at my notes. It could fill. How many people? 50,000 spectators. 50,000 spectators, and it was so well designed that basically the entire stadium could empty out in a matter of a minute or two.
Oh my gosh.
It was so well designed. Have you? Yeah, it's pretty terrible. And this is what the roof looked like. So this is what it looked like entirely done, right? And then there were these supports at the top, and basically a ring, right? A metal ring, and then there was, and they've cut this canvas out to kind of show you, but there was canvas and then these cables, and that provided shade for the spectators. And again, this is entirely self-supporting because of the tension all throughout. Again, the Romans are taking what the Greeks are doing and just amping it up. The engineering is extraordinary. The Roman Forum. We can't really talk about Roman culture without talking about the Roman Forum. It looks a little bit odd if you look at it today. It just looks like kind of this pit between two or three of the hills of the city of Rome, and it's just this area with a lot of ruins. But some of the most important things in history happened here.
Is Rome really hilly?
It is. It's not super hilly, but you have, like, these buildings right here are built on a hill. And then this is built on a hill a little bit over here. So these are the 7 hills of Rome, which we'll look at here in a second. I think I'm out of order in my slides for some reason. But for instance, I don't remember which one it is. It's either right here or right here. I don't remember which. That's where Julius Caesar was killed. That was the friend, or not where he was killed. He was actually killed in the Senate. But right there at those pillars, that was where the speech, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears," that's where that happened, right? So all of these important things are happening here in the Roman Forum. The Forum was basically like what the Greeks did with the Stoa. Remember, we said the Stoa was this building with all these columns, and inside the Stoa you would have meetings and so forth, and then outside you would have a gathering place, so marketplace. Similar thing is here for the Roman Forum.
So
Yeah.
this would have been a building.
Sorry, I'm totally out of order. One second. Nope, backwards. Go back. Go back. I didn't organize these well. Okay, so inside the Forum, well, let me go here. Sorry, I'm going to go all over the place. So basically between the Palatine Hill and the Capitoline Hill. So this is the border of ancient Rome. Okay, so this is where Rome was. We have the Tiber River. Here's the Vatican, by the way, Vatican Hill. It was called Vatican Hill before the Vatican was there. We just call it the Vatican today because it's Vatican Hill. But these are the 7 hills of Rome. And in the in-between, it was marshy. It wasn't really inhabitable. And so the Romans went to work with infrastructure, and they got it all cleaned up, and they drained all the swamps and all that kind of stuff, and they drained it directly into the Tiber. And so it's basically right here. The Roman Forum is right here between the Capitoline and the Palatine Hill. And these hills are where the high-ranking people would live. So this is where their villas were. This is where their homes were. And then in the middle was this flat area that's now been excavated, and they started to build some temples here. Originally, it was a ceremonial place with some temples. Temples, celebratory marches, processions, right? After the military comes back from a thing, you would march through the forum, and you would go into these temples and offer homage to the gods. But as time goes along, and by the way, this is modern-day Rome. These are the boundaries of modern-day Rome. And then this is that same map that we were looking at before. Okay, so you can get an idea. So yeah, just like most cities, ancient Rome is much smaller than it is today. So this is one of the original temples that was built there, the remains of the Temple of Vesta. Again, it's just a portion of it. But there were several smaller temples that were built here. And you can see the remains of that temple right there.
So it was like indoor or just
Yeah, just a small indoor temple. Probably about as big as this room, not super big. But then they started to build other areas for political reasons and for administrative reasons. And so this building here, that is still standing, is called the Curia. This is the council house for the Roman Senate. So this is where the Senate would meet. They would meet indoors. And then just next to it, we would have the Comitum. Now, some of this has been built back up again in medieval times, and so it's not all ancient. But right next to it, you'd have the Comitum, which is basically an open-air discussion area. So the Senate goes to meet, and then they would come outside and they would talk to the people. So you would go and talk to the senators, and you could chat with them and meet with them and say, I don't agree with this. Okay, then let's go back into session, and let's go back into the Curia. And this is where we get the term Curia. So even still today, there's the Curia in the church. That's where we get the term from, the Roman Curia. The Comitum is gone. We don't have any examples of what it looked like, but this is what it would have looked like back in the day. So you have these various temples, you have the Curia, and then this is basically the Comitum. It's this open-air meeting area.
It's a lot more organized than what it is now.
Yeah, very much so. But again, it's just decayed. Vandals took it, they took stone, they took material. Again, why are we going to maintain this old government that failed? Let's use the stuff, right? Let's recycle. They're very ecological. This is a bird's eye view. These were much later on. These were baths that were used later on. And some of the temples have been repurposed and actually were turned into churches. Right, where am I?
That green area in the middle, like the grass area.
Yeah, so that would just be the main meeting area like we saw before.
Were those the baths right there? You said?
The Roman baths or the baths of Trajan are right here.
Oh, what's in the middle of the grass? Swimming pool.
Just some pools, maybe some retention pools. I think it's right over here. I think it's right over here where the main prison was for ancient Rome, which is where St. Peter was held before he was put to death. So this was the hub of the city. This was the main area of the city. And then up on these hills, you can see the Colosseum, by the way, is right here. So everything's very close. And then, so yeah,
So where are like the roads?
so all around it. So this was just like the main plaza. So you would enter into the
So
forum.
this is like.
So you wouldn't have,
happened.
this is where everything
What's the
happened.
way of transportation? Because it looks
This is
pretty
insane.
far.
Carts, chariots, riding a horse, walking, just walking. Rome is very walkable. You can walk. So here's a map of the city. Where are we? We are, so the forum is like right here. Pantheon is really close. I'm sorry, forum's right here. Colosseum is right there. Pantheon's right here. Everything's very walkable. This is, so I think about this is about 2 miles or so.
And you just hop over the river.
Yeah, that's about a mile.
So you
From
can
St.
just
Peter's,
look at-
from St. Peter's to Castel San Angelo is about a mile. It's very walkable. So St. Mary Major, St. John Lateran, those are the three of the main basilicas, and then you have St. Paul outside the walls, which is down south a little bit. Santa Maria and Trastevere, again, all of these churches.
Nowadays, like in Rome, next to the Pantheon and stuff, do they let cars drive or?
Hmm? Yep, you can drive right by. The main train station goes right into the center of the city. So a lot of Romans are not gonna, so there's not a lot of industry here. The main center of government of the Italian government, of the Roman government is still here, still downtown, but all the industry is outside.
Wait, is there 4 or 5 major villages?
4.
What are the four? Sorry, what are they?
St. John Lateran, St. Mary Major, St. Peter's, and then St. Paul outside the walls is down south.
We learned that from last year. Yes, we did. Oh my word.
All right, we'll finish with arches and infrastructure next time.